Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, good evening.
We are middle of Iggeres HaKodesh Siman Yud Beis. We are on page 234.
What line?
We'll get there. We're middle.
Oh, okay.
But in general, we always like to recap. Where we are, especially when there's been such an extended break like we just had. So the letter is based on the pasuk V'hoya Maisa Hatzdaka Shalem V'avodas Hatzdaka Hashket Ubetach Ad Olam, which means that the service of tzedakah brings about shalom. Avodas Hatzdaka, the work of tzedakah, brings hashket ubetach ad olam, tranquility and security forever.
He's quoting it from where?
Yeshaya.
That's in Yeshaya, right?
So that we need to understand what is Maisa Hatzdaka, what is Avodas Hatzdaka, what is the difference between the service of tzedakah and the work of tzedakah. What is the difference between shalom and hashket ubetach? The difference between peace on the one side and confidence and security and tranquility on the other side. They seem to be very similar ideas.
Similar, yeah.
So the Alter Rebbe, the first thing that the Alter Rebbe discussed was what is shalom. And specifically we talked about what shalom is in the higher worlds. In the higher worlds there is no politics, there's no shul politics, there's no Republican malachim and Democratic malachim. There are no pro-vaxxer malachim and anti-vax malachim. Well, what's the shalom that's needed in the higher worlds? So the Rebbe explains that we have Michal and we have Gavriel. And Michal is the malach of Chesed, the archangel of Chesed, the archangel of water. And you have Gavriel, who's the malach of Gevura, and the malach of fire. And they are at odds with each other because Chesed and Gevura fundamentally have a different worldview. Their approach to everything is different. So there is no real, it would seem that there is no way for them to come together. However, we have Oisa Shalom b'Meremav. Hashem makes peace between Michal and Gavriel. And how is that? So we explained that when there's a Gili Oir Elyon, when there's a revelation of a light, which is so much higher than both Michal and Gavriel, so both of them become this battle, they both become nullified, and then they're able to work together. And when they work together, then you have what's called the Hamtakas HaGevuras B'Chsadim. Then the Gevuras become sweetened by the Chsadim, and the result is that we have Rachmim. Because Rachmim, as we explained at length in the last two shiurim, Rachmim is a combination of both Chesed and Gevura. So Shalom is always caused, and this is something that's going to be a theme that we will continue on as we continue through the Perek, that Shalom is caused by a Gili Oir, a revelation of something which is higher than both sides, than both opponents, which causes a bittul of the yeshus, of the mitzias of both sides, and allows them to coexist and to work in harmony with each other. We know, one thing we know from learning Tanya long enough, is that everything that transpires and occurs in the higher worlds is affected, right, by me and you over here in this world. How do we do that? So the Alter Rebbe says that is through tzedakah. That when we give tzedakah, what we're doing is we are giving to the lowly and the undeserving. And that causes a reciprocal effect above, that Hashem is mashpia. He gives His oir, His light, to the lowly worlds. When we say lowly worlds, we're talking about actually worlds that are very high. We're talking about the world of Bria, the world of Yitzira, where the Malachim are. For us, that's very high. For us, those worlds constitute Gan Eden. But for Hashem, they're like the poor people who we give money to. They have nothing. Compared to Hashem, they're the ultimate paupers. So when we give tzedakah, so that's us. We are being mashpia. We are giving. We are providing for those who have nothing and those who are unworthy. That causes that Hashem then provides His oir and shines His oir in the higher worlds, which causes a shalom in the higher worlds between the different malachim over there.
Why do we say they're undeserving? I mean, there are people that do deserve it. They deserve tzedakah, no?
Then that's not tzedakah. If someone does a job for you and earn the money, that's not tzedakah.
No,
Compensation.
no, they don't do a job. Somebody's learning Torah, for example, and you give to a niyam. That's
Right. But when I say undeserving in the context of he can't take you to a bezdin and demand money of you, you don't owe him anything. That's the context we're talking. What do I mean undeserving necessarily that they're unworthy people, but the money belongs to you, not to them. And you don't have to alpi din. It belongs to you, and by Hashem also. And at the end of the day, also there's an important point to understand. Considering what you're giving them, which is money, you are on a much higher level than them, which is why you're giving them. So you who are on the higher level are giving to the one on the lower level, even though you don't have to. And because the same thing by Hashem, that Hashem was on the higher level, is busy being mashpia, giving light to those on the lower level, even though also they don't have necessarily any claim on that hashpah.
But if Hashem give you, we make you as shaliach, give you money, here's 100,000. You're working on it, but you're the shaliach to give somebody that doesn't have. So it's not your money, it's Hashem money. And I know you as shaliach, and you have to give.
That is true from a philosophical perspective, but once again, at the same time, if that person took you to Bezdin and said, "Hey, you're Hashem shliach to give me the money, so you owe me money," but what's Bezdin going to say?
Let's sue you.
You can't sue you in Bezdin. You're right philosophically, but at the end of the day, in a very legal sense, it's you don't owe that money to that person. Okay. And now we're going to pivot a little over here. And till now we were talking about Shalom in the higher worlds. And now we're going to talk about Shalom over here in this world.
Where you go now?
We're going to start inside where it says Umudah Zais. It's on page 234. It's a little more than halfway down from the top. The first word on the line is Migarme.
Oh, Migarme, yeah. On the end of the
Klum.
Umudah Zais. It is also known Masha Amr Razal. That which Chazal tell us, Allah Isik B'Teira L'Shma, that someone who learns Teira L'Shma, Meisim Shalom brings peace, B'Pamalia Shalmaila, or B'Pamalia Shalmata, brings peace in the higher entourage, and the court above, and the hosts above, and also over here on the entourage below.
It's very important letter is Lishma.
L'Shma.
L'Shma.
That's a very important component of it, right? When you learn Teira L'Shma, you cause peace. You cause a peace in the higher worlds, and you cause peace over here also. Okay, so up until this point, we didn't really, if you'd have learned this Maimer Chazal, before we learned this Perek Tanya, what does it mean to make peace? But by now we already know.
Who says there's a machlokes?
But by now we already understand, there's the concept of Oisa Shalom B'Mreim, that there absolutely is the need to make peace between Michal and Gavriel, between the Malachim and the higher worlds. And the result of that is the rachmim that we receive. So we understand what it means, that when you learn Torah L'Shma, once again, just like the Alter Rebbe said before, that when you give tzedakah, you cause a tremendous hashpah in the higher worlds that brings peace. The same thing is also learning Torah L'Shma also has this effect. That when you learn Torah L'Shma, you cause shalom, you cause peace in the higher worlds. But what does it mean to bring peace in the lower worlds? Okay, so here, it would seem pretty simple. We know that our world is a world of strife and a world of machlokes and the world of ego and clashing egos. So it makes sense that we need shalom over here. But the Alter Rebbe is going to take a deeper understanding of what it means to bring shalom here in this world. And it doesn't mean, we're not talking here about two people who are obnoxious nor fighting with each other and they need shalom. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain that there actually is an inherent lack of shalom within every single individual. And what we need to do is create shalom b'pamalia shalmata. It's not only up until now we're talking about creating peace in the higher worlds. Now we're going to figure out what does it mean to make peace over here in the lower worlds. Because the world is inherently not a world of shalom. What does that mean? And this is going to be very connected. You know, very often we end off the shir connecting that which we learned to the Parshas HaShavua. And this week we're not going to have to make any external connections, it's right here. Let's see inside. Pamal Yishal Maila, making peace in the entourage above. Okay, so that we already learned about. Heim Hasarim V'Hamidis Hanal. Those are the various angels in the Midas, which we discussed earlier, the angels of Michal and Gavriel, the Midas of Chesed and Gvuram. Shehein Hechalas Al Yoinem Ba'elam Habriya Shebezeir HaKodesh. In the Gemara, it talks about Malachim and it talks about Midas. In the Zohar, as you know, Kabbalah has its own language. It refers to the same thing by calling them the different chambers in the world of Bria. Sorry? Correct. Upamalya, someone's paying attention. Upamalya shalmata. What is the lower entourage, right? So first of all, hinei chalas hatachtonim. Just like we need to make shalom in the world of Bria, which is considered pamalya shalmayla, the higher courts, we need to do it in the lower chambers, which is the lower worlds, the worlds of Yitzira and the world of Asiya. But then the Alter Rebbe is going to say, but ubefrat, the need for peace is especially apparent ba'olam hazeh, hashafel, in our lowly world. And what makes our lowly world? It's hamu'uriv toivara mechet adam harishan. Okay, so here we have the reference to our parsha that we know that the chet Eitz Hadas had a huge impact, a total game changer in everything in this world. The existence of Ra, before we even continue, when we talk about Toiv and Ra, this is something that we've mentioned in the past. Now, when you learn in Tanya, or when you learn in the Summer of Kabbalah, you learn about Toiv and Ra, good and evil. Good doesn't mean someone who is a big philanthropist and does people favors, and evil doesn't mean an axe murderer. Good and evil, in the context of Chassidus and Kabbalah, good means something which is batel to Hashem, and bad is the opposite of bittul, which is yeshes. Yeshes is Ra. From the perspective of Kedusha, of Torah, of Yiddishkeit, the ultimate good is something which is batel to Hashem, something which is transparent to Hashem and doesn't have its own ego. And the ultimate bad is, what's the ultimate bad? The ultimate bad is Avodah Zarah. What is Avodah Zarah? This is something we learned about in the earlier Prakim in Tanya. What is Avodah Zarah? Avodah Zarah is the opposite of Hashem Echad. Hashem Echad means the unity of Hashem, that everything is Hashem and everything is batel to Hashem. And when there's something which is outside of the unity of Hashem, outside of the Achdus of Hashem, that's Ra. That's the ultimate evil. Now, before the Chet Eitz Hadas, there was also Ra. How do we know there was also Ra before Chet Eitz Hadas? Simple proof.
The name of the tree was.
Okay, they already had the tree.
But that's potential.
You had the snake.
The snake tree.
Yeah, the snake, right? So we know there was Ra beforehand. And in fact, in Kabbalah, it talks about Ra even in the higher worlds. Atzilus, there is no Ra in it. In the words of Kabbalah, many times when it talks about Atzilus, it uses the pasuk, Lo yigur chara. There's no Ra in Atzilus. What does that mean, there's no Ra? There isn't even a drop, there isn't even an ounce of Yeshus in Atzilus. It's completely 100% bittul to Hashem. But once you already get to the world of Bria, and the world of Bria, by definition, is creation. What does creation mean? Creation means that there's Yeshus. There's already Yeshus. There's already Yeshus. However, in the world of Bria, the Yeshus is minimal. It's mostly Toiv, it's mostly Kedusha, it's mostly Bittul. That's why there you have the Malachim. And then already you get to the world of Yitzira, you have more Yeshus. And then you get to the world of Asiya, Haruchnis, the spiritual world of Asiya, you have even more Yeshus. And then we get to our world. And in our world, obviously there's even more Yeshus, there is even more ego. And when the world was created, there already was that Ra in the world. As we saw, there was the snake. But what happened with the Chet Eitz Hadas was that there became a Iruv of Toivara. There became the mixture of good and bad. That good and bad became,
You can't tell the difference, you mean?
inexorably connected with each other. We're going to explain what that means. And that's why the full name of the tree is Eitz. We know Eitz Hadas, but really, if you look in the Torah, it's always called Eitz Hadas Toivara. And what does that mean? So we know that the word Das means intimacy. It means having a strong relationship, a connection with something, which is why marital intimacy is known as Yediyah. V'Adam also, this week's parsha, V'Adam Yada as Chava, right? So Yada in that context means intimacy. So Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra means that when you eat it, what we become is Yoidei Tov V'Ra. We become intimately connected to both good and with evil at the same time. And within every single one of us, there's good and evil, and there's the struggle, because Adam and Chava did not have a Yetzer Hara. The evil was outside of them. The evil was represented by the snake. They were Kedusha, and they were enticed by the evil, but there was no evil within them. When they ate from the Eitz Hadas, they ingested the evil, and now both good and evil, both Kedusha and Yeshus became part of who they are. And that's why there's this constant struggle that's going on between good and evil. But it's not only that we have good and evil within us, but every single person. There's no such thing as a person who's 100% good. There's no such thing as a person who's 100% bad. And a lot of times we do actions that are good actions. We'll learn Torah, we'll do mitzvahs, we'll daven, and there's ego involved in there. What is it? Again, in the higher worlds, there's no such thing. There is no iruv tevara. It's either good or it's bad. And before the Chet Eitz also, it's good or it's bad. There was that very clear distinction. And suddenly today we have, everything is a mixture of good and bad. Our mitzvahs also have bad in them. I think we mentioned in the past that there was two Chassidim. I saw one version of the story, two Chassidim, another version I heard about two Rebbes who were talking to each other, and one of them turns to the other and says, what are we going to do about all our Avedas? And the other one answers, about my Avedas, I'm not worried about. What are we going to do about our mitzvahs? In other words, when something's identifiably evil, so you know, you'll go back and you'll do tshuva on it. Yeah. But how about the mitzvahs that are tainted by Yeshus, tainted by the Ra? That's the bigger issue, is the iruv tevara, is this mixture of tevara. And it's not only that the good has bad in it, the bad has good in it also. There's this joke about Erev Yom Kippur. So Chaim goes to Shul, and he sees his friend Moshe over there. And he sees Moshe is looking very worried. He says to Moshe, what are you so worried about? I know it's Yom Kippur coming, but you look extra worried this year. And Moshe says, I'll tell you, it's Yom Kippur. The day of Tshuva is upon us. A whole year has gone by, I have not done any Averis. What am I going to do tshuva? What am I going to do tshuva for? The whole Yom Kippur for me is going to be worthless. So Chaim says, that's not a problem, but I have a good idea for you. Down the block, there lives a no goodnik. He's nasty to everyone. He's nasty to everyone in the shul. He's always busy talking during davening. He's nasty to his wife. He's unethical in his business dealings. A shady character if you ever met one. Why didn't you go down? It's a block away. Go give him a few zetzes. Beat him up. And then you'll have your Avera. And you'll have what to do tshuva for.
Maybe it's a mitzvah to beat him up.
So Moshe says, that's a great idea. He goes over, knocks on the door, barges into the house, and he goes and he gives the guy, he lands him a few good punches, and he walks out the shul, he's all excited. Now he has an Avera, and as he's walking towards shul, behind him he hears the guy's wife, this no goodnik's wife, is chasing him. He says, hey, stop. I need to thank you. You have no idea what kind of mitzvah you just did. What is the point over here? Even many times when we do something wrong, there's a little good mixed into it. There is a little good. There is some good intention. There is something over there. And in a deeper sense, if you look at good and bad and realize everything that's good comes from Hashem, comes from Kedusha. Everything that's bad is from Klippa. So when you see something which is treif in the store, and it looks attractive, and it tastes good, that already is a iruv toivara. That is already a mixture of good and evil. It's evil because it's treif, but it's also good. There's goodness. And goodness by definition comes from Kedusha, which means that there is already a mixture in there of good and evil. And you have to understand that without the goodness, the evil would disappear. No one would be attracted to evil if it was just ugly and disgusting and black and dark. The only reason why the evil exists and is so powerful is because it has the goodness in it. Why are people attracted to non-Jewish music? Why are people attracted to art or whatever it is? relationships, all of which they shouldn't, which are unhealthy, everything has in it toiv, it has in it good. So Olam Haza, by definition, is this mixture of good and evil. And that's the condition that happens since Chetz Eitzadas. And not only is it a mixture of good and evil, but as Dr. Rebbe continues and says, V'hara sheilut al hatoiv.
That's a problem.
The default status by nature in this world, what is the more powerful element in this mixture? The yeshus, the evil. And in our lives, that's the more powerful drive. You know, in the Al Hanisim, we talk about the miracle that happened. So we say that Masarta, Gebirim biyad chaloshim, Rabim biyad ma'atim, Tmeim biyad tohirim, Rishoim biyad tzadikim. So the question is, okay, it's a miracle, Gebirim biyad chaloshim, the fact that Hashem delivered the strong into the hand of the weak is a miracle. Rabim biyad ma'atim, the fact that Hashem delivered the many into the hand of the few is a miracle. Usually that the numbers have that impact. But Rishoim biyad tzadikim, why is that a miracle? But the answer is because v'hara sheilut al hatoiv, that in Olam Haza, the natural state right now is that there's a iruv, there's a mixture, and the evil, that which is the opposite of kedusha, is sheilut, controls over that which is toiv. Kamashikosav, as the pasuk says in Krihalas, asher shalat ha'adam ba'adam chulu. The pasuk says that the Adam rules over the Adam, and in Kabbalah, this pasuk is explained to mean that the Adam of Klippa is given control over the Adam of Kedusha.
This is why the Ra is the majority in the world, much more than
absolutely,
because Sholet.
Absolutely. If you look in Tanya, in the first part of Tanya, if you look in Perek Vav, Alter Rebbe writes over there,
The opposite of what we learned before.
which is what?
We learned that there is nothing bad in the world. Everything comes from Hashem, and everything that comes from Hashem is good.
So 1 second, I'll get to you in 1 second. If you look on page 20, the last 3 lines of the page, and that's why this world, page 20, this world is called the world of Klipan Seter Achra, and therefore Kol Masa Elam Haza Kashim V'Rishoim. All that goes on in this world is difficult and bad. V'Rishoim Goyverim, but the Rishoim are more powerful. That's all that says there. Context is very important. We learned that everything is good. Everything that happens to us is good. That doesn't contradict what it's saying over here. We could talk. Okay, let's move on. And what does this cause? This causes within us. The pasuk was said when Rivka was pregnant with Yaakov and Esav, and she goes to Shem, and Shem tells her that you have Shnei Goyim bevitnech. There are 2 nations that are warring in your womb. One nation over another nation will constantly be
In battle.
In battle. Yamats means overpowering.
Oh.
And Chazal tell us that this is a metaphor for the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. We have these 2 powers within us that are constantly battling, and they're constantly jockeying for position, and neither one of them ever gets rid of the other. There's because of the Iruv Tov Ra, because of the mixture of good and bad, there's always this struggle that's going on. This is true in the world, that there's the mixture of good and bad, and we see it in the person who's considered to be a miniature world. Every one of us is a miniature world. We contain within us, we are a microcosm of the entire universe. Sometimes the good is powerful. Sometimes the opposite, that the Yetzer Hara is the more powerful one. There is no peace in the world. There will be no peace in the world. So now we understand what we're saying, why we need shalom b'pamal yishalmata. What does it mean that we need peace over here? It doesn't mean peace between some members in the shul that want potato kugel and the other members of the shul that want lakshan kugel. That's not what we're talking about over here. What we understand over here is that the entire world and the human being is inherently in a state of conflict, in a state of a lack of shalom, and the reason for it is because You have the Eruv Toivara. Ever since we have what? Ever since we have the Chetei Tzadas, there's this constant battle and struggle, and everything good has a negative, side effect. Even you look at the curses that come from the Chetei Tzadas, and the curses are the in Torah, the punishments are the natural consequences. All the natural consequences are all impacting good things. You want to have children. Children's a great thing. Oh, this is going to be bad there. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be very hard. You're going to make a parnasa. There's going to be problems over there.
Where's the Mida Connected Meeting?
Mida Connected Meeting, because the whole point of the Chetei Tzadas with Adam and Chava, when they ingested the fruit of the Eitz Hadas, they made it that the human condition is that there's no such thing as sweet and easy and peaceful and good. It should be, having a kid, that's wonderful, that's amazing. It should be easy. Making a parnasa should be easy, right? No such thing. Now there's the Eruv Toivara. There's the Eruv Toivara. I remember once someone asked me, why today, telling a woman going into labor that it's going to be difficult. Why? Because your great grandmother messed up 5,782 years ago. That's why you're going to have a tough time in labor. That's a misunderstanding of what happened. It's not that you're being punished for what your great-great-grandmother did. Your great-grandmother and great-grandfather, by the way, they effected a change in the human condition, which until this very day we're trying to fix. And that change, what happened is that there's a lack of shalom. And we need to bring about a shalom. When is the shalom going to happen? So the Alter Rebbe says, "Ve'ein shalom ba'olam." There is no peace in the world. There will not be peace in the world. Ad eis kates, until the end of times. Mashiach comes. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Then what's going to happen is we're going to have the separation of the good and the evil, which is going to make shalom. By the way, this is something which is also connected to the Yom Tov we're just coming from. We say, Ufrei Saleinu Sukkah Shleimecha. Shleimecha, when Mashiach comes, we're going to have the Sukkah of Shalom. What's the idea of Sukkah Shleimecha? We'll see, maybe we'll talk about that in a moment. And what's going to happen? Lidobik B'sharshi Mekuri Makar HaChaim Baruch Hu. What's going to happen is all the good, the Kedusha, is going to reunite, is going to become subsumed in its source, the source of life, which is Hashem. Vazai, and then automatically, Yispardu Kalpei Alayavan. All that is bad will, the word Yispardu literally means to become unpackaged, separated. Yes, yeah. It's like, imagine what?
Pirud.
Yeah, pirud.
Detached. Like.
Because the toiv is what's keeping it together. The moment the toiv, the kedusha, is taken away, it automatically just it disintegrates. It falls away. Imagine if treif didn't taste good. The toiv, in other words, all the good left from it, and it looked as disgusting as it really is, because treif really is disgusting. Imagine, it would lose its appeal, it would lose its existence. And at that time, the spirit of impurity would be removed from the earth, as the Navi says, automatically, the evil will be eradicated automatically, when it will be selected and removed from within it, the goodness that gives it life. Now, how is this going to happen? What's going to cause this? What's going to cause the separation of the good and the evil when Mashiach comes? What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? There'll be a tremendous Gili Alakus. And what happens when there's a tremendous Gili Alakus? We already learned. That's what causes Shalom. Just like in Michal and Gavriel, what caused it to be Shalom? Gili Alakus. And for example, also talking about next week's parsha, which is Parshas Noach. So one of the big questions is that we have Noach, he bought into the Teva. Now the Teva, when you first learned about the Teva, when you were 6 years old, 7 years old, and you heard it was 300 amas, 450 amas so wide, and 30 amas tall, 45, you're like, wow, that's huge. And now you realize if you take your average cruise ship today, you can fit in there probably, I'm not good at math, but probably 300 Tevas could fit into a cruise ship.
Huge ships.
You see, yeah, the Teva is small. Now, So one question is, how did Noach manage to get all the animals into the teva? That's a good question. So obviously that was a ness. Imagine 2 elephants and 2 rhinoceroses and 2 hippos and 2, right? But that's just those that are large in quantity. The Ramban talks about this. So talk about it, how the birds, how many different species of birds are there? And he had to take of them, each one 2, 7, I think from the, right?
Yeah.
And the different...
Seven couples.
Also from the birds, right? Well, that's machlokes, whether it's 7 couples or 7 individuals. That's a different rishonim. But if you think about the amount of species of animal life there is in the world, how you fit them all in? The Ramban, interesting, the Ramban says that, okay, so why did you have to have, if it's anyways a miracle, so why did you have to have a big boat? Could have been a canoe. If it's anyways they're all fitting in by a miracle, why did you have to have a...
They don't want him squeezing.
So the Ramban says, Hashem, even when he's making a miracle, he doesn't want it to be, as they say in Yiddish, he doesn't need that it should be, what?
Stick in the eye.
Right. Okay.
Stechen the Eigen.
Yeah. Anyways, but that's only problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, you had in the boat, you had lions and leopards and sheep and lambs. Why weren't the lions eating the sheep? So we had over there V'gar Zev and Keves. So it's brought down that because there was in the Teva Taka there was a very high level of godliness that was revealed in the Teva, and because of that there was the Freis Aleinu Sukkah Shleimecha, there was Shalom, and that's why Aryi Kabak or Yechal Tefen, which says when Mashiach comes, when there will be Shalom, that the lion will eat straw like the calf. That happened there also. It was it's brought down that in the Teva there was Meir Oir Me'in Elam Haba. There was the Oir that was in the Teva was similar to what was in Elam Haba, and that's why there was absolute peace over there. And that's also the idea of a sukkah. In a sukkah, they're very, very high light. There's a very high Oir of kedusha in the sukkah, which is why Sukkah is the Yom Tov of Achdus. We bring together the Lulav and Esrei. What causes the Achdus? As we're seeing over here, Shalom is always caused by a higher Gili Oir, which everyone is nisbatel to, and that's why when Mashiach comes, we talk about the Sukkah Davda Nefela, so Freis Aleinu Sukkah Shleimecha, the Shalom that will be when Mashiach comes also is to a tremendous Gili Alakus.
When David HaMelech Sukkah formed?
That's the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash, Sukkah Davda is the Beis HaMikdash. Kamei 3 lines on the top of page Kuf Yitches. Kamei Shekosov, as the Pasuk says, Kimala Aretz Deas Hashem, the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. This is the tremendous Gili Alakus that will be when Mashiach comes. And V'nigla Kavod Hashem Chulum, and the Kavod of Hashem will be revealed. This will be throughout the entire world when Mashiach comes. There will be Shalom in the world. So what do we have up until this point? We have Shalom comes through a high revelation of Elokus. So far we discussed it in the context of the way it is B'Pamalia Shalmayla. In the higher worlds, Shalom is needed between Bechol and Gavriel. That was what we discussed before today's year. And today we're talking about Shalom B'Pamalia Shalmata, the understanding that our world inherently is a place where there's a lack of Shalom. It's inherently a world of strife, inherently a world of chafing. There's another word I'm looking for. A world of it was always okay.
Or in this world? In
this world, yeah. It's a world where there is no Shalom. It's a world of discord. There's the ear of Tevara.
Always something.
Yeah. So, and when will Shalom finally come to this world? Yeah. Now, Alter Rebbe doesn't say this, but it's interesting that earlier the Alter Rebbe said that how do we cause the Gili Elokus and the Shalom B'Pamalia Shalmayla? Through giving tzedakah. Remember the Alter Rebbe said that when we give tzedakah, we're being mashpia to someone who doesn't have. We cause ashpa, and the higher worlds are bring Shalom. And perhaps it can be said also the same thing is, we know we've learned many times in Tanya, in Yisrael and the Gal and all of tzedakah, the importance of tzedakah and bringing Mashiach, and perhaps also that's a connection that to bring about the Gili Elokus, which will bring about the Shalom when Mashiach comes. When we give tzedakah, we're being mashpia. So Hashem also is mashpia his Gili Eir of this world, which will result in finally there being a state of Shalom in this world. So that was point number 2. But now we need to make this personal in our own lives. What does it mean? We said before that the world is the olam, the person is the olam katan. A person is a small world. I think we've mentioned in the past that there's a medrash, if I remember correctly, it's a Tanya de Ve'elio, or maybe Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, where he goes through the whole human body, the whole human anatomy, and explains, this represents this, and this represents that. How the entire universe is represented in the human body. But it's not only geographically that the whole geography of the world is represented in the human body, but we know there's makom, there's space, and there's man, there's time. Everything that ever happened, or that will happen, also exists within the human being. Every event, which is why Yetzias Mitzrayim, it happened 3,300 years ago, but it's part of our avodah. Mashiach coming is also Geula. Also, that's why there's the Geula Klaus, where there's when the world will reach a place of redemption, which is a place of Shalom. But there's Geula Pratis. What does Geula Pratis mean? Geula Pratis means when a person reaches a state of inner Shalom, of inner tranquility. When does that happen? So let's look inside. However, and the person down here in this world, B'chol eis mitzoi. The pasuk says in Tehillim, right? Al zois yispalol kol chasid le'eis mitzoi.
What does that mean?
Le'eis mitzoi, at the time when Hashem is to be found. Zut tefillah. When is Hashem to be found? During davening. When does a person reach a state of shalom? When does a person reach a state of geula? That is during davening. Oi, or shar itim mizumonim, other times that are designated lihisboidedim koinai, to be in solitude with one's creator. Kol echad lefi maisav, everyone according to their actions, zoicha. So the primary time is during davening, but a person can achieve this also at other times. When a person sits bisboidedus with his creator, and thereby zoicha leme'ein birrazeh. We're zoicha to, we're not mamish the geula. You're not mamish going to be at the level where we are when the geula comes, but me'ein, a taste of it. We can be zoicha to that during davening. Meaning, what is davening? Davening is meant to be a time when there is shalom within oneself. When there's a shalom, when there's a birur, a disencumbering of the toiv v'ra, a whole day we're fighting between good and evil, and even the good has evil, and even the evil has good, because there's a constant battle between the godly and between the yeshus, the ego. During davening, a person has the ability to reach a place of shalom, a place of bittul, and a place where the nefesh habahamis is disengaged. It goes to sleep during davening, and a person is really at oneness with Hashem and arrives at a state of shalom. That is really what davening is all about. Arriving at this place, you want to call it a place of ecstasy, whatever you want to call it, but a place where you've moved away, you've moved past Olam Hazeh, you've moved away, you've moved past the ego, and you're at a state where you're totally, completely identified with the Nefesh Elikis. You've been, somehow or other, you've been able to transcend the natural Iruv Toivara, the natural mixture of Toivara, which is the normal human state. And obviously this takes Avodah. And that's why by Chassidim, davening was always at such a premium. And there's such an emphasis on davening, because to arrive at the state obviously requires a tremendous amount of Avodah, but it's possible.
So the Breslev doing good. A lot of it bothered.
Of course the Breslev are doing good. It's the question.
You have to do a lot of contemplation before the davening.
But the question becomes, how do we arrive at this place of shalom? The natural state of the human being is not shalom. Natural state of the human being is strife.
So how do you overcome?
How do you arrive at that? No, so by now we should know the answer. How do you arrive at that? It's through a Gili Er L'Mayla. How do we have that Gili Er L'Mayla? So he says, this is Al Yidei Eisek HaTeira L'Shma. Remember we said earlier that Kala Eisek B'Teira L'Shma. If you learn Teira L'Shma, you bring Shalom B'Pamal Yishamayla, Pamal Yishamata. Because you learn Teira L'Shma, you cause a tremendous Gili Elokus, which allows you to experience Shalom and Geula during davening. V'chein, and the same thing is Al Yidei Tzedakah. Tzedakah also causes a tremendous Gili Elokus. Why? The logic that we said earlier. Because when you're mashpia lamanda less than megarmei, when you're mashpia to the one who doesn't have, to the one who's unworthy, the Eibishter is mashpia to you. And that's why it says, the Gemara says, that Rabbi Eliezer yoiv pruta la'ani v'hader matzli. Rabbi Eliezer would give a pruta, he would give a coin to tzedakah, to a poor person, and then he would daven. And why? Because he said ksiv, because it says in the pasuk, ani b'tzedek. I, through tzedek, through tzedakah, echze panech, I get to experience and see your face. He begins gilui ha'ara v'ashpas hadas v'atvuna. This allows us to have a tremendous gilui, and allows us to understand and lisboinen and to meditate, to contemplate b'gedulas Hashem, the greatness of Hashem, lohoilad mezeh, and to create through that dechilu rechimu sichliim, a love of Hashem and an awe of Hashem, which are a product of your seichel, kenoida as is known, v'al zeh, and through this nivrar hatoiv la Hashem. When you're davening, what happens is the toiv, the good, becomes disencumbered and goes up to Hashem. V'nifrad hara, and the evil, the yeshus, gets separated. Kamashakosov, as the pasuk says in Mishlei, matshreif lekesef, v'kur lezahav, v'ish lefi mahalalei. Both gold and silver, both of them, in their natural state, they have impurities in them. So they need to be refined, they need to be smelted. So there's the oven in which they would refine silver was called a matshreif, and the oven, it's the English translation, I think it's a crucible, and the furnace for gold, you need even a hotter furnace. It was called a kur. A kur, yeah. It's also, that's what they used for zakur hazav also. So the pasuk said, pasuk pshat to the pasuk is that silver is refined. In other words, you get to see when you stick, you can have a piece of silver, it looks beautiful, but when you stick it into the fire, suddenly you realize how much garbage, impurities, I think, is in there, right? And the same thing with gold also. And the same thing is also, the more people praise a person, the more, as we know, that the Eibishter is medactic with a person, and therefore the more the impurities will be seen. The less a person is praised, the more you can look at him and say, oh, he's a good person. The more he's praised, the more from heaven they judge him. But in a deeper sense, what he's saying over here is like this. As Alter Rebbe says, Pirush, what does it mean? Ish lefi mahalalei? Lefi hilulei es Hashem. Based on how much you praise Hashem during davening, bo'ei mekadas, with depth of the mind, lahoyle dechiru achimu, to be able to give birth to avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, kacha nivrar hatoiv v'nifrad hara, that's what causes the good to be disencumbered and to be separated from the ra. Kibirur upirud hasigim mekasav, just like the impurities are separated from silver, v'zohav, and from gold, b'matshreif v'kur, in those refineries. So the pasuk means sigim is the impurities. I think it's called dross. I think it's called.
What?
I think the word is dross, dross. But upon him, we have so the pasuk is saying, and we know in Torah everything is exact. Gold and silver, we learned already in Likutei Amarim and Perek Nun. We learned that gold and silver are a metaphor for avas Hashem and yiras Hashem. Remember that silver is kesef, yes, and gold is yira. So how do you arrive at pure avas Hashem and pure yiras Hashem? How do you purify your zav and your kesef? So ish, that's what matshreif lekesef v'kur lazav. How do we refine our avas and yira to separate? Because there's this iruv, right? There's this mixture of good and bad because of chatei tzadas. How do we separate? If I want to daven, but I want to have a pure love for Hashem and a pure awe of Hashem. So ish lefi mahalalei, that depends on how much you praise Hashem.
I have a question. Rabbi Eliezer, Yahiv Pruta, before you go to Matzle, why we have a custom to give by Baruch David? Why we don't have the custom before you start davening to give Pruta? Most people, by Baruch David, and include me, are going to put the... That's before davening.
The Iker out Tfilah Shemini Esrei, so that's fine. Yeah. A lot of people give before davening, but even the Baruch David is still considered before the main parts of davening. So, what we have over here, you realize we've gone 3 steps. We've talked about Shalom b'Pamal Yishal Maila by the Malachim. We've talked about Shalom in Pamal Yishal Mata in the world as a whole, and that's going to happen. When is the world going to arrive at a state of peace when Mashiach comes? And then we have Shalom within every single person, and that is, when does the Shalom within every person going to come? That's going to come. That happens during davening, and that also requires tzedakah. Now, obviously, this letter, as are many of the other letters in the Iggeres HaKodesh, is a letter that Alter Rebbe wrote as a fundraising letter. And as we mentioned many times, when the Alter Rebbe wrote letters about tzedakah, his incentive is the way he incentivized his chassidim to give tzedakah wasn't through telling them that, if you're going to give tzedakah, you're going to get, you'll have a lot of gashmis to give brachas. His chassidim were holy people. So what does Alter Rebbe says? You want to daven. And when you daven, you're looking to arrive at a place of peace, a place of shalom, a place of geula, a place of tranquility, a place where you don't have to worry about Yetzer Hara, at least during the time of davening. And you want to know how you accomplish that? That is through giving tzedakah. That is what the message is Alter Rebbe over here. And now we understand what the pasuk says: V'hoya ma'aseh hatzedakah shalom. That through giving tzedakah, through the act of giving tzedakah, we arrive at shalom, and we understand that shalom we call shalom Papal Yishal Maila, and also with tzedakah we call shalom within ourselves during davening. And as I mentioned earlier, perhaps also that tzedakah is also connected to bringing Mashiach and bringing the shalom throughout the entire world. Now, before we conclude, some of you over here noticed, and some of you mentioned, that today the Tanya that I'm using is a different Tanya than the one I usually use, different than the one that you always use. And there's a reason why I'm using this Tanya today. So this Tanya arrived in the mail to me. I got it in the mail on Erev Yom Tov, a few hours before Yom Tov, and it came together with a letter. So I would like to read you this letter.
Now or just now?
Heshana Rabbah.
No, I'm saying just now, this year.
Yeah.
A few days ago.
A few days.
Monday
Yeah.
Monday day. It's a new Tanya?
So this letter, this letter I received from someone who he has a Tanya shir. He gives as a Tanya study group in Michigan, and he writes as follows: Dear Naftali, this Tanya, edition 7533,
What does that mean? 753?
was inspired by your description of the Rebbe's campaign. And also our classes are very much modeled on your online shiurim. So some of you might remember that a while ago we spoke about this idea. I don't remember exactly what, but it was a little more than a year ago, that the Rebbe in the late 1970s, in 1978, the Rebbe asked that a Tanya should be printed in every single country in the world. And at a further point in the early 80s, around 1983, the Rebbe took it a step further, and the Rebbe said he wants a Tanya printed in every single city where there is a Yid. And this is obviously a very creative and innovative and different. The Rebbe didn't say, I want people learning Tanya everywhere, in which case it would have been enough to print 100,000 Tanyas in New York, or today probably they do it in China, and to ship it to everywhere. No, the Rebbe wanted that a Tanya, the physical Tanya, should be printed in every single. So this Tanya is issue 7,533. In other words, the Tanya, with the printing of this Tanya, the Tanya has been printed 7,533 times throughout the world, in pretty much every single on every single continent and in cities that you wouldn't know. In fact, in the back of every single Tanya, if you look, you'll see there's a listing of all the Tanyas where they've all been printed.
I remember during the 6-Day War, they printed a Tanya in Sinai.
Right.
By the canal, actually.
Right. I'm not sure it was 6-Day War, a little later, but yeah, they printed in Egypt in many places, and they printed later on in Lebanon. They printed in many places, yeah. So again, here it is. This Tanya edition 7533 was inspired by a description of the Rebbe's campaign, and also our classes, because he runs a Tanya group, are very much modeled on your online shiurim. Please accept this copy as a gift. It would mean a great deal if you could read from it while teaching one of your current classes on Iggeres HaKodesh. Wishing you and your family a joyful festival season, and hope to see you soon in the near future in Yerushalayim. Warmly, Michal. So here we have a Tanya, which is directly inspired by the shir here in Flatbush, a Tanya which is printed in Michigan, which is very, very meaningful to me and something which should be a source of pride to all of us over here. And realizing the impact that this Tanya class has around the world, Baruch Hashem.
And Michael is Sar Israel.
Right, Sar HaMayim. Now, when we spoke about this last time, we spoke about how the Rebbe said at that time, the Rebbe quoted a very famous letter from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov wrote a letter to his brother-in-law. And in his brother-in-law, he described a vision that he had, or as the Baal Shem Tov describes it, he ascended to heaven. It was on Rosh Hashanah, actually. And in heaven, he found the chamber of Mashiach.
Who's this?
The Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov had described, yes. And in the chamber of Mashiach, he found Mashiach, and he asked Mashiach, Eimosai Ka'asi Mar, when are you coming? Reminiscent of the Gemara by Rabbi Shua ben Levi. And Mashiach answered, that when your wellsprings, the wellsprings of Chassidus, will be spread chutza to the most outermost regions, and that's when Mashiach is going to come. And the Rebbe pointed out, it doesn't say which means when the waters of your wellsprings are spread to the farthest places, but when the wellsprings themselves reach the farthest places. The Rebbe says, if I'm going to print the Tanyas here in New York and ship them off everywhere, that's not the wellspring, that's the water from the wellspring. That means that the source is in Crown Heights, or if I print them in Eretz Yisrael, or whatever it may be, Kfar Chabad, Yerushalayim, and everyone else is receiving. Though the point is, we have to have the Mayan itself, the wellspring itself has to be in every single area. And that's why the Rebbe wanted the Tanya to be printed in every single place where there's Yidden around the world, and bringing the Mayan literally as an effort to bring Mashiach even closer. But I think based on what we're speaking about in the Tanya share today also, we understand that the concept of Mashiach ultimately, what we're looking forward to Mashiach comes, the day of Shalom. We're looking to make peace. Again, it's going to be Shalom in the entire world. And we're not talking about Shalom on a simple level. That will also be L'yisa goyel goycherev, L'yilmudu eid milchama. There won't be any more battles, obviously. There won't be any more war, and all the weaponry, as we know, will be turned. That's the easy part, relatively. The harder part is to resolve the essential state of conflict, the essential state of lack of Shalom which exists in this world. And that will be resolved when Mashiach comes. And also, when Mashiach comes, we'll also all have collectively our Gula Pratis, and our state of internal conflict and internal disharmony, if that's a word, will be resolved also. And perhaps also that's part of the idea. I think it's very clear that every time that a Tanya is printed in a location, there's a tremendous Gili Oir that accompanies that.
So the
tremendous, the person who printed this is Nashliach. It's a tremendous Gili Olakus, a tremendous revelation of light. And as we know, the Shalom, the Shalom of Mashiach, is going to be brought about by this tremendous hashpah, gili of the area itself. And there's no question that every Tanya that's printed in another location is another step towards bringing about the Freis Aleinu Sukkah Shleimecham, another step to bring about the ultimate Shalom which will come when Mashiach comes.
Rabbi, they have
Shabbat, everyone.
They have the